Hi, I'm Kaylee, and this is part 2 of my 2018 bookshelf tour. This time I'm going to be showing you the shelves right behind me, the classics. In case you didn't know, Books for MKs is a charity that donates books to missionary kids all over the world. If you want to donate to the kids, you can do so at GoFundMe.com. There is a link down in the description, and there's a button at the end of this video where you can donate to the kids. So in case you haven't seen my previous bookshelf tour video, I have thousands of books. There's a lot of them. So I'm breaking up my bookshelf tour into several different videos based on genre and just kind of going through bookshelves in different rooms or in different parts of my house in separate videos. I'm trying to get it down into some manageable chunks. So these bookshelves actually sit in my dining room. And I think that I just love being able to look at them as I'm eating my meals. These are definitely some of my favorite shelves in the whole house. They have some of my favorite books, some of my favorite rereads, favorite authors, all those classics. You guys know I'm all about the classics. So without further ado, let's go straight into it and let's take a look at my classics. This is going to be one of the longer videos because I have a lot of classics. All right, so I'm going to start with the top shelves, which are not alphabetized, but they're put together by collection because, of course, they look pretty. So the first one is my Classics Library collection, where it has bind-ups of different novels together. So the first one is Water Babies and Peter Pan, The Secret Garden and A Little Princess, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, Little Women and Little Men, The Scarlet Pimpernel, The Princess and the Goblin, The Light in the Forest, and Aladdin and Other Tales from the Arabian Nights. Then we go over to the next International Collectors Library. First I have the Brownings, Letters and Poetry, My Cousin Rachel, Green Mansions, Jamaica Inn, The Brothers Karamazov, Favorite Poems of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, The Autobiography of Benvenuto Cellini, I'm probably saying that wrong, The Annals of Tacitus, The Confessions of St. Augustine, Adam Bede, The History of Henry Esmond, and The Spoils of Poynton. Then my next shelf is some of my favorite books that are really old and fragile. I have The Five Little Peppers at School, The Five Little Peppers Stories that Polly Pepper Told, and The Five Little Peppers Midway. One of my favorite books is Tom Brown's School Days. Then we have The Swiss Family Robinson, Mother Carey's Chickens, Hans Brinker or The Silver Skates, The Courtship of Miles Standish, and one of my favorite books, Thelma. And now I start alphabetizing my books by author's last name, starting with Richard Adams. So I have Tales from Watership Down and Watership Down, which I know technically isn't a classic, but somehow it just kind of ended up on the classic shelf. It just kind of has its own little spot. Then we have a lot of Louisa May Alcott. We have The Lost Stories of Louisa May Alcott, Little Women, Invincible Louisa, which is a biography of her, An Old-Fashioned Girl, Rose in Bloom, one of my favorites, Moods, Work, The Inheritance, A Marble Woman, Good Wives, which is the second part of Little Women, and then a bind-up of the complete illustrated stories of Hans Christian Andersen. Then we get into some Jane Austen. So I have Emma, Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Northanger Abbey, Persuasion, another copy of Emma, Mansfield Park, a biography of Jane Austen, Sanditon, What Jane Austen Ate and What Charles Dickens Knew, which really should be in the nonfiction section, but I put it here because it's, Jane Austen-y. And then I have the complete novels of Jane Austen and this big one. And I also have 4 novels of Charlotte Bronte's, Jane Eyre, Shirley, Villette, and The Professor. The Life of Samuel Johnson, Lady Audley's Secret, another copy of Jane Eyre, and then 3 more copies of Jane Eyre. I went through a phase when I was kind of collecting Jane Eyre. Another copy of Villette, and then Anne Bronte's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, a biography of Frances Hodgson Burnett, and then next come some of her books, The Making of a Marchioness, The Secret Garden, A Little Princess, and Little Lord Fauntleroy. Then we have Cecilia, The Poetical Works of Burns, Pilgrim's Progress. Then on our next shelf, we have some John Buchan books. The 39 Steps, Green Mantle, The Three Hostages, John McNabb, The Blanket of the Dark, A Prince of the Captivity. And then we start with some Edgar Rice Burroughs books, The Wizard of Venus, The Return of Tarzan, Carson of Venus, Savage Pellucidar, The Beasts of Tarzan, A Princess of Mars, The Son of Tarzan, Out of Time's Abyss, At the Earth's Core, and Tarzan of the Apes, and a mystery, The Oakdale Affair. Then we have an Everyman's Poetry edition of Lord Byron, another beautiful copy of Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, The Complete Father Brown by G.K. Chesterton and The Man Who Was Thursday, The Innocent Wayfaring, The Portable Coleridge, and now come a lot of Wilkie Collins books, The Law and the Lady, No Name, The Moonstone, The Woman in White, and then going to the next shelf, continuing with Collins, we have The Dead Secret, Basil, and Hide and Seek, The Children of Odin, The Frenzied Prince, James Fenimore Cooper's Sea Tales, The Deer Slayer, The Pathfinder and the Spy, The Last of the Mohicans, and then Stephen Crane's The Red Badge of Courage, The Adventures of Robin Hood, Dante's Inferno, Robinson Crusoe and Moll Flanders, The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, and then comes a lot of Dickens. We have Martin Chuzzlewit and Bleak House. And going to the next shelf, it's all Dickens. On this shelf, Barnaby Rudge, The Wicked Wit of Charles Dickens, Stories from Dickens, David Copperfield, Little Dorrit, Pickwick, and Catalogue, which is really just an old name for the Pickwick Papers. The Mystery of Edwin Drood, Great Expectations, Our Mutual Friend, The Old Curiosity Shop, Hard Times, Dombey and Son, Nicholas Nickleby, A Tale of Two Cities, Oliver Twist, and another copy of A Tale of Two Cities. Starting with our next shelf, we have some Emily Dickinson. I only have volumes 2 and 3, and I'm missing volume 1, so I don't have all of them. And then I have some of her poems that have been translated into Spanish. Then I have 2 books by John Donne. The first one is just selected poems, and the next one is No Man is an Island. Then we start with some Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. First I have a Sherlock Holmes devotional, and then The Complete Sherlock Holmes, The Lost World and Other Stories, Round the Fire Stories, A Study in Scarlet and The Hound of the Baskervilles, Conan Doyle Stories, and the memories or the memoirs of Sherlock Holmes translated into Spanish, Las Memorias de Sherlock Holmes. And then comes Alexander Dumas, The Man in the Iron Mask, The Black Tulip, The Count of Monte Cristo, which is one of my favorites, The Three Musketeers, and 20 Years After. And then we have some George Eliot, Middlemarch, The Mill and the Floss, and on the next shelf, Daniel Deronda, The Black Stallion, Tom Jones, Madame Bovary, Johnny Tremaine, one of my favorites, The Good Soldier, and here comes a whole bunch of the Hornblower series. These are completely out of order, so don't go by the order. We start with Lieutenant Hornblower, Hornblower and the Hotspur, Hornblower during the Crisis, Hornblower and the Atropos, Ship of the Line, Beat to Quarters, Flying Colors, Commodore Hornblower, Lord Hornblower, and then another kind of older edition of Commodore Hornblower, and another old edition of Lord Hornblower, and the last one, Admiral Hornblower in the West Indies. Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl, the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, the poetry of Robert Frost, and the Forsyth Saga. The next shelf starts off with some Elizabeth Gaskell, one of my favorite authors. We have Ruth, Cranford, Wives and Daughters, North and South, and Mary Barton, Cousin Phyllis and Other Tales, and The Life of Charlotte Bronte. Next comes Marjorie Fleming, Cheaper by the Dozen, Bells on Their Toes, Cold Comfort Farm, The Vicar of Wakefield, The Princess Bride, that's such a good one, The Willows in Winter and The Wind in the Willows, The Golden Age, English Fairy Tales, And then 3 adventure novels by H. Rider Haggard, She, King of Solomon's Mines, and Alan Quatermain altogether. Edith Hamilton's Mythology, The Federalist Papers, and then some Thomas Hardy, starting with Jude the Obscure, The Return of the Native, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, The Woodlanders, The Mayor of Casterbridge, and Far from the Madding Crowd. And then on the next shelf, we have The Song of Roland, The Scarlet Letter, The Celestial Railroad, and The Birthmark. Then Favorite Fairy Tales Told in Scotland. I do love good Scottish fairy tales. Then The Complete Works of O. Henry, only Volume 1, so I'm missing Volume 2. And just stories by O. Henry. The Lady of Quality, Stowaway, The Prisoner of Zenda and Rupert of Hentzau, Raffles, Stingery and Dead Men Tell No Tales, The Iliad, Flemington and Tales from Angus, The Portrait of a Lady, Wood Magic, and the Everyman's Poetry edition of John Keats, Kipling's The Light That Failed, The Man Who Would Be King and Other Stories. You can tell I love Kipling because there's a lot of Kipling. Stalky and Company, Plain Tales from the Hills, The Light That Failed, and then a duology, Rewards and Fairies, and Puck of Pook's Hill. Just So Stories, and one of my favorites, Kim. Then continuing with Kipling on the next shelf, a choice of Kipling's prose, a Kipling selection of his stories and poems, Kipling's adventure stories, Captains Courageous, The Five Nations, which is a book of poetry, and the Barrack Room Ballad Verses, and The Phantom Rickshaw, Anna and the King of Siam, King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, and then a lot of Jack London books altogether, The Call of the Wild, The Sea Wolf, White Fang, The Son of the Wolf, The Iron Heel, and The People of the Abyss. The poems of Longfellow, At the Back of North Wind by George MacDonald, so these next few are by George MacDonald, The Light Princess, The Golden Key and Other Stories, and The Grey Wolf and Other Stories. These are collections of his short stories. The Princess and Curdie, Lilith, and Phantastes. Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur, Dr. Faustus, The Children of the New Forest, Mr. Midshipman Easy, Billy Budd and Other Stories, Gone with the Wind, and Scarlet. On the next shelf, I actually have another copy of Gone with the Wind, and then some books that are not Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne, Mr. Pym, The Red House Mystery, and A Table Near the Band. Then I have my very favorite poet, Milton. I have both the portable Milton and the annotated Milton, Parnassus on Wheels, Lolita, and then a lot of Scarlet Pimpernel books. Sir Percy Hits Back, I Will Repay, Lord Tony's Wife, Sir Percy Leads the Band, another copy of I Will Repay, The Elusive Pimpernel, El Dorado, and The Adventures of the Scarlet Pimpernel and Rosemary. Then a few books by Jean Stratton Porter, Laddie, At the Foot of the Rainbow, and Freckles. Men of Iron. On our next shelf, we start with Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho, The Castles of Athlin and Dunbayne, The Italian, and then The Cloister and the Hearth, Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, and then here comes all of the Shakespeare, Anthony and Cleopatra, Much Ado About Nothing, Romeo and Juliet, Troilus and Cressida, and The Merchant of Venice, Othello, The Winter's Tale, Twelfth Night, A Midsummer Night's Dream, one of my favorites, and then 3 of them together, Measure for Measure, All's Well That Ends Well, and Troilus and Cressida, Julius Caesar, Hamlet, Macbeth, Henry IV Part 2, one of my favorites, another copy of Romeo and Juliet, an edition of beautiful stories from Shakespeare, which are kind of retold for children, then the Encyclopedia of Shakespeare, and a biography of Shakespeare. On the next shelf, we have Pygmalion, Frankenstein, an Everyman's Poetry edition of Shelley, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, The Voyages of Joshua Slocum, The Bride of Lammermoor starts off my extensive Sir Walter Scott collection. Then we have Guy Mannering, Ivanhoe, Waverley, The Lady of the Lake, another copy of Ivanhoe, because you can never have too many copies of Ivanhoe, The Talisman, The Heart of Midlothian, Old Mortality, the wonderfully delicious Rob Roy, The Antiquary, Kenilworth, and another beautiful boxed copy of Waverley, which is my very favorite by Sir Walter Scott. Then I have Welsh Legendary Tales, Cornelly, Heidi, and The Bronze Bow. The next shelf has The Black Arrow, Treasure Island, and The Wrong Box. Then several Scottish novels, Kidnapped, Catriona, The Master of Ballantrae, The Weir of Hermiston, Gulliver's Travels, Vanity Fair, The Idylls of the King, and then a lot of Anthony Trollope. The Duke's Children, The American Senator, Dr. Wardle's School, Lady Anna, The Prime Minister, and beginning the Barsetshire Chronicles with The Warden, Barchester Towers, Dr. Thorne, The Last Chronicle of Barset, and Framley Parsonage. And now we get into the section for Mark Twain, the complete short stories of Mark Twain, A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, Tom Sawyer Abroad, The Prince and the Pauper, The Mysterious Stranger and Other Stories, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn in matching editions, Number 44, The Mysterious Stranger, The Unabridged Mark Twain, but I only have Volume 2, I don't have Volume 1, Pudd'nhead Wilson. And next comes Lew Wallace's Ben-Hur, The House of Mirth, The Importance of Being Earnest, The Picture of Dorian Gray, Complete Fairy Tales of Oscar Wilde, The Virginian, and then P.G. Wodehouse's Mike and Smith, Mike at Rinken, and Leave It to Smith. I have 2 copies of the Aeneid because one of them is prose and one of them is translated into poetry. Jules Verne, I have several books. The first is The Journey to the Center of the Earth, Master of the World, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Around the World in 80 Days, and 5 Weeks in a Balloon. Then I have several fairy tales that don't really fit anywhere else, and so they go at the end. The Mammoth Book of Fairy Tales, Folk Tales from the Irish Countryside, and Irish Hero Tales. And those are all of the classics that I have on these shelves behind me here. These are the ones that you usually see when I'm filming my videos, because this is where I usually film. Please leave a comment and let me know which of these books are some of your favorites, which of these are some classics that you really want to read. I would love to hear your comments down below. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and remember, the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.